Hello, I want to welcome you to another episode of Recovery Today. My name is Gaidurgis. I'm the host of this show that explores multiple ways that people experience recovery or assist and sustain recovery for those who suffer from a substance use disorder and or co-occurring mental health challenges. This is sponsored by the Recovery Resource Center in Salisbury. And our guest today is Drummond, who is from the Joseph House Workshop. And I want to welcome you to our episode today, Rudy.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Rudy, as myself, I'm a person in long-term recovery. I've had multiple decades of recovery. I understand that you yourself are with a fairly lengthy piece of recovery?
Yeah, I have a little bit over 7 years right now. Yeah.
Okay. And what caused you to have a moment of truth, as it were, for a lot of folks, that they kind of hit a bottom, as sometimes that's described as? And so what was your moment maybe from 7 years ago?
Well, I think the great motivator that most people in recovery find is pain. The pain had gotten so great that I no longer, the pleasure of trying to keep on going, the pain outweighed that pleasure. So it was not anything that was like a major epiphany moment. It was just that, I just wanted the pain to end.
Okay. And how long had that pain been going on for you?
Well, it started when I was 16 years old, and I didn't even come around to recovery until I was 30, so about 14 years.
14 years.
Yeah. And I first started coming into recovery when I was 30, and I'm 41 today, okay. And I've only got a little bit over 7 years, so there was some time in there where even in being serious, there were still some trips and some bumps and some falls. But I really thank God for it all, because it all taught me lessons along the way.
So the science of addiction and mental health concerns, some folks talk about that in a simple way of saying your brain is hijacked. And it's a mind, body, and soul type of a hijacking with the use and the phenomena of compulsion to use drugs and or alcohol. That being said, how was that for you?
Well, the obsession and compulsion was definitely alive and well, constantly thinking about how to get drugs, where to get them, how to go out and use them, and drinking alcohol and all that. And the compulsion just always stuck in that same cycle, even when I didn't want to, having to do it. So I definitely believe in the disease model. I believe that it's body, mind, and soul. But there's a spiritual component as well, and that spiritual component is very important to maintaining long-term recovery, I believe anyway.
Okay, yes, and I really was hoping that we're going to go dig into that a good bit deeper. So let's start first with then your story about your use, as you mentioned, at 16 years old. So what was like life before 16, and then what happened?
Well, it's funny because I kind of wasn't going to go into this, but now I feel the need to.
Okay.
So I've always had this major identity crisis.
Okay. Because
growing up, my father was a very hardworking man, and he instilled in me education and behaving in a way that was to present yourself as respectable. So a lot of the things that I saw, like pants sagging and jargon and slang, those things weren't a part of our household. I remember my father actually saying, if I catch you with your pants sagging, I'm going to beat you with the belt you should have been wearing. So yeah, and so when of course when I ran into the years, not saying that there is a way that people are supposed to act or people are not supposed to act, but when I ran into peers of my color, of other African Americans, other Black Americans, I just didn't fit because I had this proper speech and, I had my pants up and things like that. And so I started to then hover around white friends. And because I was not white, I didn't really fit. So I was stuck in the middle. I had this identity crisis from a very early age of who was I? And I didn't know. And I was always trying to reach out to people and be a part of something. And never really was a part of anything until I found my using buddies. And then we had something in common. We used drugs together. So at first I really didn't even, it wasn't like when I started using, I got this warm and fuzzy feeling. I actually didn't even like it at first, but I wanted to be accepted so badly that I continued to use. And then of course, after a while, I began to love it, so.
Okay.
So that was what the years for me were like, the pre-using years.
Okay.
And then once the using came in, it just began to get disastrous because I'm one of those that they label as a garbage head. I would do anything you put in front of me.
Okay.
It always started with the alcohol, removing the inhibition, and then I'd be willing to do anything. So.
Wow. So this identity, as you described, or this maybe struggle for connection or acceptance, and whether that be spiritual or with your family or your community, your friends, what was sort of a low point to lead you to this major change or shift to recovery?
Well, what happened for me was, and I remember going to, and I'm not going to say any particular fellowships, but I remember going to a 12-step fellowship.
Okay.
And a friend of mine saying, don't you feel at home? And I was like, I can identify, but I never really felt all the way at home. And I remember at one point, it was hard for me to compromise because we talk about multiple pathways to recovery.
Yes.
And it was hard for me to compromise that there's this one single way and this is the way it's supposed to be. And I followed that way because that's what I thought I was supposed to do. And later on, I found out with some growth that, whatever way I decide to choose, as long as I have some principles to live by and some steps to follow, and if I commit myself to that, I can maintain recovery. So that the part that changed that identity for me, and I'm not promoting anything, but for me, it was finding my true identity in my faith and being a Christian. So that was when I grasped a hold of that, it kind of took all the other wanting to be identified by something else and remove that.
Okay. Well, with that in mind, more deeper then is this sort of crises or bottom of not just identity, but I guess connection to a spiritual being or a higher power or whatever you choose to call that. Can you describe that a little bit more?
So the spiritual malady, because it is my belief that the wanting that connection, the degradation of everything I had to do, the dereliction, and all that was all weighing on my spirit. So there was originally always a sense of not being good enough, which I believe is spiritual, not being accepted, and then when you couple and pile all the other stuff that I had to do to use on top of that, there's this bankruptcy that's going on the inside that only the connection to a higher power can fill. Because I often look at it, like what all I ever wanted was for everything to be okay. And I wanted to have this pseudo spiritual feeling. So the drugs and the alcohol gave me that pseudo spiritual feeling, but only the real spiritual feeling can fill that, because all I ever really wanted was peace and contentment and joy. And I thought that I could get that through instant access
Sure. Yes.
to drugs and alcohol, instant gratification of that. And it takes time to develop those things, and it takes a relationship with not only higher power, but oneself as well. If I don't have a good relationship to me, like, how do I treat me? That's very important.
So you're saying the very things I was hoping you would say, and share that idea of this change. So with that change, how can you describe a little bit more maybe some of the steps or the process for you? Because I'm sure you know the coined phrase, recovery doesn't happen overnight. It's not an event, it's a process. So can you give a couple examples or nitty-gritties of that?
Well, yeah, well, that process, like I said, coming in 30 years old and
Yes.
41, so that process sometimes is very hard, and it doesn't happen by me wanting it to happen. It happens by me actually learning about what the steps are to my recovery.
Okay.
And for me, since I went through a 12-step program, I actually worked the 12 steps of the program, which brought me in closer contact to higher power and to myself. And I really wanted to, and I was thinking about this on the ride over here, touching on the forgiveness piece of it.
Yes.
And, you know, for a long time, what kept me stuck in the loop was not being able to forgive myself. So, you know, there's what's called a fourth step. And through the initial couple of fourth steps, I never, ever put myself on that list. And it finally dawned on me that, Rudy, you need to forgive yourself for some of the things that you did, because I was brought up in a good Christian household. I was taught that those things were, you know, no one wants to think of themselves as a bad person, and I know that I'm not morally bad. I was just had a hijacking of the brain, as you said.
Yes.
My brain had been hijacked, almost like a possession. And the things that I did, I just could not reconcile why I was doing those things. So I actually had to forgive. So part of the process that you're talking about with those hard steps was coming to a place of not only forgiveness with my higher power, because I thought my higher power had wronged me, and then not only forgiveness with other people, because at first I could not see the part that I played in it. So before I could even get to any of that forgiveness, I had to accept my role, that I played a part in this. Yeah, I did a lot of these things, and I never wanted to take a look at those things. So when I opened up and took a look at those, I then was like able to see that the forgiveness had to be that God didn't do anything to me. I was doing things to myself, and that other people mostly were at odds with me because I were at odds with them.
Okay.
And the part of being at odds with them was because of the things that I had to do in order to maintain this fake spiritual feeling. So that caused me to pile up a lot of things on top of me that I was just not proud of. Shame and guilt and pain and hurt, and having to work through all that shame and guilt on the inside. That's tough work. It's not easy.
Yeah, it is. It isn't messy. It's messy work. And wouldn't you also say you can't do that alone?
No, you definitely need a group of people, especially because the filter that I use to view life is the lens is dirty. So I need other people to help me clean that lens up. And in the fellowship that I could do, we call that accountability partners. So I need someone sometimes to come alongside me, because a lot of times the things that this brain will think of are not always good. I think I'm smarter than the average bear, only to find out that we all think we're smarter than the average bear. So so I need people to say, hey, that doesn't sound too good. So it definitely can't be done alone. And not only that, but I'm really happy that I don't want this to be taken the wrong way. I'm not happy that we have an opioid crisis, but I am happy that that is bringing awareness to the disease of addiction, and how even the community needs to come alongside, because it's affecting everything and everyone. It's just a weight on the community.
Wow, you said some very powerful things there, and we could go in a lot of directions, but because of time, so I'd like you to talk a little bit about your work, your professional life now, and how that began sort of a trajectory for you once you went back to school, right? And then what's that now look like?
Well, it's funny because when I first started human services, I was looking for the least maths and the least Englishes that I could take. So I began that process, but the whole time was still using, never finished. And when I came to the Joseph House Workshop, where I'm the assistant director now, I came in as a resident over 7 years ago.
Okay.
And went through that program, and the little sisters of Jesus and Mary, gave me a job. Even though I didn't deserve it, they still did it anyway. And I decided, well, if I'm going to be in the human services field, at least let me finish this degree that I started so long ago for the wrong reason. And beginning that, went to Delaware Tech and got my associate's degree, and on to Wilmington University and got a bachelor's and a master's in administration of human services. Wow. And so it's really coupled along with my own path in recovery. It just speaks volumes to people for hope, because if I can do it, anybody can.
Yes.
So.
Yes. So do you have any aspirations then, you're now the assistant director at the Joseph House Workshop, in terms of that you're in this position to help people beyond just role modeling, but really leading and being a change agent, as it were. So what's that look like?
Well, it's funny that you would bring that up, because I'm just in the talks now with my local pastor of our local church, which is Sunrise Church, and we're looking to the future that I maybe even come on as an associate pastor. So I think that's the trajectory that it's going, because and a lot of people cringe when they hear religion, but we believe it's more about a relationship than it is about any particular religion. Okay. So I think that's where the most hope and encouragement, because we're doing some things in the community now that are bringing people a lot of hope and a lot of encouragement. And we're even coming alongside some of the recovery agencies in the community, and they're allowing us to do that. And it's just a wonderful thing, because when we talk about spiritual malady, hopeless is one of those pieces that causes that bankruptcy. And hope is a powerful thing. To be able to, if a person can shift from being hopeless to hopeful, that's the beginning of that process of walking out that recovery. So, and sometimes I know, like with me, it was just, the hope started off as just a little teeny flicker. And now that it's a flame, that I have hope enough that everyone can recover. I have that hope. I know it's not realistic, but I still hold on to that hope. So.
Well, you just say as well that that hope has this essence of faith as well, that and sort of I'm always reminded of the idea that jump and the net will appear.
Yeah, and it will. and the thing about jumping in the net, we try to wait for the net to appear. We got to see the net first, but it never works like that.
Yeah,
you got to take the jump.
It's fake.
It reminds me of a movie where I was watching where a guy was running through a temple, and part of it was actually Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and he was standing on the side, and it said, take a leap, and his father was dying and he needed to get to this place, but he couldn't see, so he just stepped out, and there was a bridge there, but the bridge was the color of the canvas of the background.
Yes.
So it didn't look like there was a bridge there. So
yes.
Sometimes, there's always a bridge there, but we just can't see it, because sometimes it's blended into the background, but we have to take that leap. And
those are some big pearls of wisdom that you're now really living a life of purpose that is helping other people. and you've received that help as a benefit or as a reflection of the work that you're doing, and you're encouraging others to do the same thing.
Yeah,
right?
you got to give it a way to keep it. And who would ever thought that a bum like me could be living with a purpose?
Wow, wow.
So,
Well, as you would say, a bum like you, or as a not a bad person trying to get good, but as a suffering person who is trying to get well.
yeah.
And with this disease, as it were, as a community and as individuals and as families are wrecked by that. What gives you hope in the current climate then, besides what you mentioned about the opioid issues, where there is a more coming together, and people like yourself as leaders are coming together in a different kind of way, or?
Yeah,
or
absolutely. That's what, it's just what you said, that's what gives it the hope. I mean, the very fact that as a church we're able to partner with an agency of recovery means that there's a coming together like that has been unseen lately. And there's a new word that's out in the human services field, which is continuum of care. And the continuum of care are allowing people to continue that process of recovery. So now it's not only just 15, 14, 30 days. People are getting 3, 6, 9 months of treatment. And it's extending to halfway houses and transitional houses and churches and IOPs, and the community is really taking a look at it, and more monies are available for these things. So yes, that gives me a lot of hope that we as a nation are actually taking a look at substance abuse and mental health disorders as co-occurring, because that's just something that happened recently, and that they both need to be addressed in order to have the recovery. So yeah, that's very hopeful.
Wow. Well, then to our viewers, what would you want to say that those who are watching this, who are maybe family members and concerned about a loved one, or an individual who is watching this and is really struggling and maybe has had attempts at relapse, like you seeming to suggest that your first couple years of first exposure to treatment, it didn't take right away, as it doesn't. So what would you say to folks like that, or the families, or that are surrounding them? What last words of wisdom or would you share to them?
Well, I would say, just like with any chronic disease, be it cancer, be it diabetes, be it addiction, the professionals have to get involved. Like, I wouldn't not go to a doctor to try to ease or get relief from my cancer. I would do everything, and the people in my life would do everything to get me and push me to the place where I needed to go. And it's the same thing with addiction. I mean, sometimes we try to handle this thing, especially family members, on our own, and think that we can love people into it, or shelter them into it, but that never really works. People have to be moved to a place of treatment, seeking help, get involved with that. And a lot of people call it tough love, but really what it is just allowing a person's bottom to be raised. Allowing the bottom to be raised for a person can then move them into a place of wanting to help for themselves long before they would do it, had it been, we'll just, shelter the individual, and because the desire has to come from the inside. So how do we get there? Well, we expose people to the truths of addiction. That's how we do it.
Can you add on to that about, you mentioned in the family aspect, and sort of, you reminded me of shame and privacy and protectiveness, as it were, and we can't let the neighbors see this, or our family, yet likely they already know. What would you additionally say to that concern?
And I would say, because I grew up in a family like that, and I would say that, the amazing things that can come out of pushing beyond that and actually opening it up, because, there are places for people who are family members of addicts and alcoholics and mental health, and there's a great network there that people can get hope and and peace from. But I know that the tendency is to want to keep those things under the rug, but those are the same things that keep sick people sick. So it's not a moral failing, it's a sickness. And I don't think anyone would be ashamed of someone who got cancer. That wouldn't make me ashamed. What would make me ashamed is if someone had cancer and I wouldn't take them to the place to get well.
Yeah.
That's the real shame.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Wow. You've just so reminded me of the power of love and an open heart in this whole recovery process that really shines light, and particularly a light of hope, as it were.
Absolutely. And it can start with just a little teeny piece.
Is that like called a mustard seed?
Yeah, yeah. I like that. A mustard seed. Yeah.
Yeah, a mustard seed of hope.
That's right.
Wow. Well, I want to thank you for
Thank you for having me.
for sharing your experience and your strength, your hope, your faith, your.
You're very easy to talk to too. So.
Cool. I'm enjoying this. I wish this can continue on because I'm learning a lot as well and being reinforced by just the power of faith and recovery and the miracles that happen. So I want to thank our viewers again for watching the whole episode of Recovery Today and hearing that recovery is a process, it's not an event, and that our local Recovery Resource Center, which actually Rudy is a board member of, and where I first met him, is available with a multitude of resources and support and love and hope to our community. And again, thank you for viewing this latest episode.